before I tell you what I did, and trust me, it was bold, I need you to understand why I did it. Why I stood outside at 2 a.m. in the biting cold, clutching a paintbrush in one hand and shaking in the other. Why I took something so personal, so painful, and turned it into a public display that made half the neighborhood gasp and the other half clap. Why I took a risk I never thought I had the courage for, because when my brother was killed, silence wasn't an option. But apparently, according to my HOA president, neither was honesty. Oh, and before we dive deep, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unbelievable neighborhood stories like this. It really helps us keep telling the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is. Now, let's go back. It had only been 3 weeks since Jamal died. 3 weeks since my mother wailed into a hospital gown. My father punched a wall he couldn't break, and I stood frozen, feeling everything and nothing all at once. 3 weeks since the cops who pulled the trigger claimed he matched a description, though that description was always suspiciously vague when applied to someone with skin like ours. He was unarmed. He was 22. He was my baby brother. I didn't know what to do with the grief. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I'd scroll through our old text messages until my vision blurred. One morning, I found myself outside on the porch, still in my pajamas, holding the flag. It was black, bold, with Black Lives Matter written across it in white, clenched font. It wasn't fancy, just cloth and thread, but it meant something. To me, to Jamal, to what we lost. So I mounted it on the railing of our porch. It waved quietly in the breeze. And for the first time since a funeral, I felt like I could breathe. But of course, the quiet never lasts. That afternoon, while I was inside trying to write a eulogy for a man whose life was cut short, I heard a knock. Then another, louder. Then the ding-ding-ding of my Ring camera, alert going off nonstop. I opened the door, and there she was, Judith Whitmore, HOA president, polo shirt tucked into her khaki shorts. Visor on, clipboard at the ready. If entitlement had a uniform, Judith wore with pride. She didn't greet me, didn't say sorry for your loss, didn't even make eye contact. She just held out a printed document and said, "This flag violates HOA Regulation 4C, 2, exterior decorations and political messaging." I blinked. "Excuse me." She tapped the paper like a school principal. No signage with political statements may be displayed on properties without prior approval from the homeowners committee. That includes flags. I looked at her, stunned. This isn't political. This is personal. She didn't flinch. "You'll need to take it down within 48 hours or face a fine of $200 per day. I laughed. I genuinely laughed, because it was either that or cry again. "Judith," I said, "my brother was killed. This is about honoring him." She adjusted her visor. "And I'm sorry for your loss. But HOA rules exist for a reason." And with that, she turned and strutted down my porch like a tyrant walking off a battlefield. She believed she'd won. I didn't take the flag down. Not in 48 hours. Not in 48 days. Instead, I made copies of the citation and posted them on my social media with the caption, "My brother is dead. I can't even grieve without a $200 fine. Tell me again how this isn't systemic." The post went viral. Neighbors started checking in on me. Some quietly nodded in solidarity when they passed by. A few dropped off letters and flowers. But others followed Judith's lead. My trash bin was knocked over 3 times in 1 week. Dog poop showed up on my welcome mat. One night, someone threw eggs in my car. Judith pretended to know nothing. "Teenagers," she'd say, shrugging. Unfortunate. A week later, I came home to find a flag missing, cut from its pole, not torn, not wind-blown, cut, a clean slice across the base. Like someone brought scissors, climbed onto my porch, and erased my grief. I sat down on the steps. Didn't cry, didn't scream. Just sat there and stared at the empty space where my heart used to fly. That's when the idea came. If they didn't want to see it on my house, then maybe it was time they saw it somewhere much bigger. You see, Judith lived at the end of the cul-de-sac. Her house was white brick with manicured shrubs and a perfectly trimmed lawn. She spent more time grooming than her personality. And behind her house, a wide, pristine garage wall, facing the street, facing the entire neighborhood. Judith had insisted for years that it remain blank, because the aesthetic of the neighborhood demands simplicity. Well, let's just say I had a different aesthetic in mind. I didn't want to get arrested. I wasn't trying to go full vigilante. So I made sure to do my research. Turns out, the wall was technically visible from public property, but was part of shared fence line, meaning it legally belonged to the HOA itself, not Judith alone. And I'd been volunteering with the HOA cleanup committee for 2 years before Judith turned me into her personal enemy, which meant I had access, which meant I had the timing. All I needed now was the paint. It was a Friday night when I finally acted. The streets were quiet. Judith had driven out with her wine club friends. Her porch light was off. I wore black gloves, a hoodie, and a cap, and I carried a small backpack filled with black, red, and white spray paint, not to vandalize, but to speak, to say what she tried to silence. And by the time the sun rose, every single neighbor would see it. A message they couldn't find, couldn't erase, couldn't ignore. By the time I got back home, my adrenaline was still spiking. You ever do something so bold, so unlike anything you've done before, that you question your own reflection afterward? That was me, staring at my own face in the bathroom mirror, paint on my fingertips, sweat on my back, chest pounding. But I wasn't scared. I was awake. For the first time since Jamal died, I felt like I hadn't just let the world roll over me. I had spoken back, and loud enough for every fake smiling neighbor and clipped shrub conformist to hear. At 6:47 a.m., I heard the scream. A shriek, really, piercing, indignant, and furious, like someone had stepped on a raccoon in stilettos. I threw on my robe and walked the front yard, pretending to be confused. And there she was, Judith, frozen in her driveway, arms flailing, mouth wide open in horror as she stared at her garage wall. Painted across it, in bold capital letters, Black Lives Matter. Underneath it, I'd stenciled a silhouette of Jamal's face, just like the photo on his obituary. Below that, in small letters, you silence the flag, but you can't silence the pain. It wasn't messy. It was beautiful. Clean lines, powerful colors, raw truth. And Judith? Judith lost her mind. Within minutes, the neighborhood group chat was in chaos. Screenshots were flying. Some folks were tagging the HOA board. Others sent thoughts and prayers to Judith like someone had actually attacked her in the night. But the most surprising thing? A good 40% of the messages were positive. People were saying things like, maybe now she'll learn that this isn't just about rules. It's art, and it's real. About time someone said something. A few even dropped clapping hands, emojis. I couldn't believe it. Apparently, Judith's reign wasn't as universally adored as she believed. By 9 a.m., she was pacing up and down her driveway, screaming into her phone. I could hear her from across the cul-de-sac. This is defacement. This is domestic terrorism. Get the HOA lawyer. I want fingerprints. DNA swabs. Someone had to have told her about the HOA property line issue, because by mid-morning she put up a huge tarp over the wall. Too late. Photos of the mural were already trending. One neighbor, a guy I'd never spoken to, uploaded it on Reddit with the caption, HOA bans BLM flag. Neighbor responds with a mural on HOA property. Justice served. It hit 30,000 upvotes in 2 hours. And that's when the local news van showed up. Yep, Channel 5. Judith tried to block the cameraman with her body, like she was Secret Service. The anchor, this young woman with sharp bob and zero time for nonsense, was already mic'd up and recording live. Can you confirm whether the HOA had previously issued fines for flags or signage relating to racial justice? Judith stuttered, barked something about privacy, and ended up storming off mid-interview. But they kept rolling. Guess who they interviewed next? Me. I didn't out myself as the painter. I'm not stupid, but I spoke plainly. I talked about Jamal, his death, the flag, the violation notice. I said, when you lose someone to a broken system and then your community tells you to grieve quietly, it's like dying twice. That clip got clipped and reposted over 400 times. Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, it struck a nerve. People understood what Judith never could. This wasn't about breaking rules. This was about being broken and still standing. Later that day, I got a call from the HOA vice president. His name was Leonard. He was always quiet in meetings, the type to agree with Judith just to keep the peace. But now he was nervous. Listen, we're having an emergency board meeting tonight about the, art installation. Art installation? I repeated. That's what some folks are calling it. And, well, some members think it's beautiful. Others think it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. I let him ramble. Then I said, let me know what you decide. Click. That night's board meeting was a disaster. I wasn't allowed in, obviously, but word leaked out fast. Judith wanted criminal charges filed. She wanted the HOA to pay for repainting the wall white immediately and issue a public apology. But apparently, not everyone agreed. A new mom who just moved in 3 months ago asked why flags supporting the troops or Blue Lives Matter signs weren't ever cited. A biracial couple shared that they've been afraid to even speak up at HOA meetings, and now they finally felt seen. Even Leonard, yes, Leonard, suggested that maybe this whole thing could be a teachable moment. Judith nearly fainted. Meanwhile, Roger, Judith's husband, was spotted sitting on the porch again that evening, watching quietly. When I passed by, he gave me a small nod and held up a tumbler of iced tea, like he was toasting me, like he knew, and maybe he did. Around 11 p.m., I got an anonymous note under my door, written in clumsy cursive. No signature. It said, they tried to wash it off tonight, but the paint stayed. Thought you should know. A neighbor who's tired of being silent. I stared at that note for a long time, because Judith might have owned the clipboard, but she didn't own the street. By the next morning, I couldn't open my door without seeing someone slow down out front to glance at the mural. Some cars passed slowly. Others stopped entirely. A few took photos. Some just sat quietly in their parked vehicles, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the mural like it had something to say to them. And not just Judith. It was surreal. I'd walked these sidewalks for years, and no one ever really noticed me before. I was Jamal's mom, the quiet widow, the polite woman who always trimmed her hedges and brought muffins to the block party. But now I was the woman with the mural, and the neighborhood was finally talking. It was Sarah from 3 houses down who started the petition. She was a tech worker, usually kept to herself, but that morning she rang my bell holding a tablet like she was storming City Hall. Look, I know you probably want to lay low, but people are behind you. Some just need to see they're not alone. I scanned the screen. Petition to remove HOA President Judith Carter for misconduct and suppression of community expression. Already 38 signatures. By noon, it was 112. People were coming out of the woodwork now. Jorge, the landscaper who'd been fined for leaving his truck parked overnight, even though it was in front of his own house. Elena, who said Judith once told her to trim her bushes more American style. Chris and Naomi, who said they'd tried to host a pride event and got denied because rainbows weren't in the seasonal color palette. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. And suddenly, what started as one woman's protest had become a reckoning. Judith wasn't silent either. By that evening, she'd sent a mass email to the HOA mailing list, subject line, restoring order to our community. It was long, for paragraphs of veiled threats and passive-aggressive jargon. She claimed community defacement, irreparable harm, and my favorite line, the values of our neighborhood are being challenged by individuals with personal agendas. Yeah, like basic human rights were a personal agenda. She ended the email with a reminder that HOA elections were months away and that she was confident the community would choose order over chaos. It didn't have the effect she thought, because that night we printed the mural on shirts. Yep, Glenn, bless his graphic designer soul, helped turn my wall into a wearable statement. The shirts read, Silence Flag, Louder Wall, with the mural printed across the back. By Friday, half the neighborhood kids were wearing them like uniforms. And then Then came the journalists from The Atlantic. Yeah, The Atlantic. They'd seen the Reddit thread, the local news clip, and now they wanted to profile the HOA mural movement. Their words. At first I hesitated, but then I thought, why stop halfway? I gave the interview. I talked about Jamal. I talked about being fined for grieving visibly. I talked about neighbors who turned their heads when it wasn't their battle, and how now those same neighbors were standing beside me. And I talked about Judith, not with malice, just the truth. By Saturday, the mural had gone from neighborhood scandal to regional headline. News vans lined the street. Artists reached out asking if they could contribute. Someone even offered to project a mural on a downtown building for an awareness campaign. Meanwhile, Judith, she was unraveling. She issued a cease and desist letter, LOL. Tried to stop the t-shirt sales, LOL. And then, in a last-ditch move of desperation, scheduled an emergency meeting to vote on enforcing a new ban. No public displays or expressions that disrupt HOA visual harmony. That was the final straw. Because that same day, Leonard, the HOA vice president, resigned. He sent a letter to the board and CC'd the entire community. He said he could no longer support leadership that chose silence over humanity, and that he hoped this neighborhood could one day reflect the diversity of thought and love it claims to support. I stood in my kitchen reading that email and cried, not because I was sad, but because I wasn't alone anymore. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and cast long shadows on the street, a group of us met at the park across the road. We brought candles. Some brought flowers. Someone printed Jamal's face and placed it on an easel next to the mural. It wasn't a protest. It was a vigil. And that night, as we stood silently, holding our lights and our hearts together, Judith stood on her porch, arms folded, face stony, watching. But this time she didn't scream. She didn't call the cops. She just watched, because maybe even she knew the tide had turned. The vigil had done something no HOA email, board meeting, or fine ever could. It made people feel. Not just see, not just nod along, but feel. And once people feel something deeply, truly, they don't just go back to business as usual. They act. So when Sunday morning arrived, we didn't wait for permission anymore. We called a vote. Now here's the thing. HOA bylaws are tricky, but they do allow a special vote to recall the president, provided 60% of homeowners sign a petition and 30% show up for the meeting. We had both. Judith tried to fight it, of course. She even tried to claim the petition was invalid because it was emotionally coercive. I swear, I've never seen someone weaponize emotional deadpan like she could. But rules were rules. And for once, they were on our side. We booked the clubhouse for 6 p.m. Sunday evening. Funny enough, it was the same place Judith once told Jorge he couldn't use for his daughter's quinceañera because it wasn't culturally neutral. Yeah, by 5:30 p.m., the line to get wrapped around the lot. Families, singles, elderly couples, new homeowners, people who'd never attended an HOA meeting in their lives. Everyone was here. Inside, it was standing room only. You could feel the tension in the air like static before lightning. Judith sat at the head table, flanked by her two loyal board members, Diane and Mark, both of whom looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I took a seat in the second row, right between Glenn and Elena. The meeting began with Judith's usual condescending tone. I'd like to begin by reminding everyone that this is a civil discussion. We will maintain decorum. But the crowd didn't flinch. If anything, it got quieter, sharper. Glenn whispered, "She doesn't realize we've already decided." Leonard, bless him, had agreed to moderate the meeting despite resigning days earlier. When he took the microphone, the room broke into soft applause. "Thank you all for being here. I won't waste your time. You're here because enough of you demanded change. And tonight, we'll have a vote on whether HOA President Judith Carter will be recalled from her position effective immediately. No fluff, no legalese, just clarity." Judith scoffed. "Really? We're going to oust a community leader over a mural." You could feel the collective bristle in the room. That's when Sarah stood up. Not over a mural. Over everything the mural stands for. And one by one, People began speaking. Jorge went first. He shared how Judith fined him repeatedly for parking his work truck in front of his own house, even though the rules only prohibited commercial signage, not commercial vehicles. Then Elena, she talked about how Judith once told her outdoor nativity scene wasn't aligned with HOA-approved religious expression, even though there wasn't such a thing. Then Naomi and Chris shared their rejection of a neighborhood pride picnic. Then an elderly black couple, Mr. and Mrs. Evans, stood up together and said they'd never once been greeted by Judith in 8 years of living on the same street. Not once. Mrs. Evans ended with, "We don't want revenge. We just want to belong here, too." Silence. Thick, emotional silence. Judith sat still, mouth tight. For the first time, she looked small. Then Leonard asked a question. All in favor of recalling Judith Carter as HOA president, please raise your hand. Hands shot up like wildfire. I counted roughly 70%, more than enough. Judith stared. Her mouth opened, then closed again. For a moment, I thought she might lash out, start throwing accusations, maybe call security. Instead, she stood up, gathered her purse, and walked out. No speech. No, you'll regret this. Just the sound of her heels clicking across the tile like a slow retreat. And when the door finally closed behind her, the room erupted in applause. Later that night, we gathered at my house again. Not to plot, not to plan, just to be. We sat in the yard around the mural. People brought snacks. Kids played tag between the cars. Someone brought a speaker and played soft jazz. And at one point, Glenn looked at me and said, "You know, I think this might be the first time in years this place actually feels like a neighborhood." I nodded, because it did. It finally did. But I wasn't done. Not yet, because Judith may have been voted out. But her wall? Oh, that pristine, HOA-compliant, regulation-approved beige wall, it was still sitting there. Still a blank slate. And I had one more message to leave behind. It was Glenn's idea, honestly. We were sitting in his garage, surrounded by old spray cans, stencils, and pieces of plywood painted in half-finished slogans from his activist days. There was a kind of old-school rebellion in the air, like being in the nerve center of a movement. "Look," he said, tapping a large board he'd just primed white. "You already made your stand. But what if we could say it louder, not with volume, but with vision? Not your wall this time. Hers." I blinked. Judith's. He grinned. I stared back, and then I smiled. Judith's house sat quietly at the edge of the cul-de-sac now. No longer the hub of power. It looked smaller, more ordinary. Funny how fast a crown turns into a paper hat when people stop kneeling. But I wasn't interested in revenge. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about visibility. It was about message. So I made my choice. And at 7 a.m. the next morning, on a beautiful Monday draped in sunlight, I walked up their front wall with Glenn, Elena, Sarah, and Jorge. We weren't hiding. We wore shirts with the mural printed on them. We brought a film crew. We brought supplies. We brought meaning. And we got to work. It took 4 hours. Neighbors stopped by, quietly offering water, breakfast, and even chairs. People began forming a quiet ring around the property, not as protesters, but as witnesses. Some brought flowers. One woman brought a framed photo of her son, killed by police 5 years ago. Brushstroke by brushstroke, we painted. In place of Judith's pristine beige, siding bloomed a new mural. But this one wasn't bold or angry. It was soft, peaceful, deliberate. A hand reaching for another hand, one black, one white, grasping in midair, surrounded by a background of soft violets, yellows, and rich blues. Above the hands, the words, "We see you, we hear you, we stand with you." The police arrived just before noon. 2 cruisers, 1 officer each. But instead of sirens and handcuffs, we got puzzled looks and calm conversation. Got a report of property defacement. One officer said, I nodded. "This is Judith Carter's house. But according to county records, she doesn't own it anymore. It was bought last night. By me." I held up the deed, freshly notarized. That was the final card. Yes, I bought the house. Judith had quietly listed it weeks ago, probably expecting a clean break from the mess she caused. She underestimated how much the community still cared. I didn't buy it to live in it. I bought it to make it something else. By 3 p.m., I stood on the front lawn, surrounded by dozens of neighbors, local reporters, and even a few people who'd driven in from other parts of town. I cleared my throat. Today, this house is no longer a symbol of control or exclusion. It's now the Community Arts and Justice Center, a place for expression, healing workshops, and yes, murals. Applause rang out like a tide crashing against a broken dam. Tears fell, mine included. For Jamal, for the mural, for everyone who ever got a notice telling them they didn't belong here. Judith, as expected, was watching from the end of the street. She stood near her car, arms folded, sunglasses covering half her face. I didn't wave. She didn't flinch. But I saw it, that small, involuntary twitch of her jaw, that moment of realization. She hadn't silenced me. She'd amplified me. Her attempt to suppress visibility had created a movement with more eyes on it than she could ever imagine. And then came the kids. One by one, children from the neighborhood walked up to the new wall with their parents, holding small brushes dipped in color. We'd saved a space along the bottom of the mural, blank, open, inviting. "Paint your name," I said to the first little girl. "This wall is yours too." By sunset, that wall held over 100 names in every size and color, each one a signature belonging, each one a vow. We're not going anywhere. That night, we hosted the first open mic at the new center. People read poems, shared stories, sang songs that had lived too long in silence. An elderly woman read a letter she wrote to her brother, who died in the 60s marching for civil rights. A teenager sang an original ballad about identity. A middle-aged man shared a story about being profiled just a few blocks from here. And when it was my turn, I stood under the soft lights with Jamal's photo in my hand. I didn't mean to become a voice, I said. I just didn't want to be erased. My son didn't get to see what this neighborhood became. But I hope wherever he is, he knows we're still fighting, and we're winning. By Tuesday morning, my phone was a war zone of notifications. Texts, calls, emails, interview requests, blog articles, and the one that made me drop my toast, an Instagram post from Viola Davis. She'd shared a photo of the mural. No caption, just 3 black hearts. That was all it took. The floodgates opened. Local outlets picked it up first, calling it the mural that changed a neighborhood. By noon, CNN had called. Then MSNBC. Then a producer from The Daily Show wanted to fly me out. Then the NAACP chapter president from another state offered to help fund the center. I was stunned. It felt like riding a rocket without a seatbelt. But with the exposure came something else. Something I had braced myself for, but still hit like a gut punch. The backlash. It started small. A few angry comments under a news article. A Blue Lives Matter flag quietly strung across the street. A guy in a truck driving slowly past the center, flipping us the bird. But it escalated fast. One morning, we found someone had spray-painted Thug Center in black on our trash bin. Another day, a suspicious package was left at the door. It turned out to be filled with manure and shredded copies of our mural printed on cheap paper. I laughed when I saw it, not because it was funny, because the desperation was loud. And then Judith reemerged. I knew she wouldn't stay gone forever. Women like her don't disappear. They regroup. They re-strategize. This time, she came with a new tactic. Lawsuits. She filed a complaint with the county board accusing me of visual pollution, unauthorized business activity in a residential zone, and, get this, community manipulation through political art. That last one, I didn't even know was a thing. Her attorney, a stiff, balding man who looked like someone printed elite out of a fax machine, stood outside the county office and gave a statement to the press. This isn't about race. This is about rules. The HOA guidelines exist for a reason, and no amount of attention-grabbing can supersede lawful order. Elena texted me a screenshot with, "My God, even his font looks racist." We weren't scared, but we were exhausted. Sarah and Glenn helped me organize a legal defense team. Community members started a GoFundMe that crossed $20,000 in 48 hours. Lawyers volunteered time. Artists pledged support. And the local university offered to host our programs if we got shut down. Still, I started losing sleep. It wasn't the lawsuit, or the threats, or even the financial pressure. It was the fact that we were being asked, again, to justify our right to exist. That weight, it sinks into your chest and settles there like concrete. Then came the tipping point. One Thursday afternoon, a teenager named Malik walked into the center. I'd never seen him before. He was quiet, eyes on the floor, hoodie up despite the heat. I greeted him. "Hey, you good?" He didn't speak at first, just walked to the mural wall, looked at the names, then turned back to me. "My mom said I should come here," he mumbled. She said maybe it would help. I sat with him for a while. We didn't talk much. Eventually, he said, "I get called the N-word at school. Teachers say I'm too sensitive." I nodded. He kept talking. "The principal says it's just kids being kids. But I don't think I want to be here anymore." The way he said, "here," didn't mean the center. It meant alive. My throat closed. I reached out and held his hand. Just gently. No lecture. No quote. Just presence. Because sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can offer someone is letting them feel seen. That night, I added something new to the wall. Below the clasped hands, under all the painted names, I added a tiny phrase in gold brushstroke. "You matter." No hashtags. No slogans. Just truth. The next morning, Malik came back with his mother. He smiled. And for the first time, I saw that light in his eyes that only comes from hope taking root in someone who almost gave up. By the weekend, the lawsuit had already started falling apart. Judith's complaint was riddled with contradictions. Several homeowners signed affidavits, saying she had approved other decorative elements far beyond her supposed limitations. One even brought out an email where Judith personally approved a 30-foot inflatable Santa Claus for a neighbor's holiday party 2 years ago. I'll never forget the image of that affidavit. Per HOA records, the inflatable Santa had been deemed a community delight. We framed that one and hung in the office. Right under it, a sticky note. So, is activism. And just like that, the tide turned again. Even the HOA board, newly reorganized, voted to revoke any standing objections to the mural or the center. Judith's lawsuit was dismissed. Her face, caught on camera outside the courthouse that day, looked like someone had just canceled her subscription to Superiority. And honestly, that was enough for me. But there was still one more thing I had planned. One more act to end this story the way it deserved. Victory in court was sweet. But for me, true vindication wasn't going to come from paperwork. It was going to come from joy, from visibility, from community, from refusing to go quietly ever again. So we planned a parade. Yep, a real, old-fashioned neighborhood parade. 1 week after Judith's lawsuit was dismissed, we sent out flyers. Community Unity Parade, this Saturday, for PM, all cultures welcome, all ages encouraged. Bring color, bring music, bring your voice. The goal wasn't just to celebrate the mural or the center. It was to celebrate us, all of us, the weird, the loud, the too bright for Judith's Bay Street residents. And oh, did we deliver. Saturday arrived hot and breezy. We had face painters, kids with glitter capes, local high school drummers, bubble machines, and chalk artists covering the sidewalks with peace signs and fists raised in unity. Everywhere I looked, there were people dancing, laughing, unapologetically alive. One elderly man wore a dashiki and a rainbow flag like a cape. A little girl painted a sunflower over her eye. Teens rolled through on skates with boom boxes strapped to their backs. And right in the center of it all was Malik, riding a bike with streamers and a massive grin. He waved to me. I waved back. Then, at exactly 4:45 p.m., just as we passed the old HOA clubhouse, now draped in banners reading, "Everyone belongs," I saw her, Judith, standing on her porch, arms crossed, sunglasses on, the human equivalent of a frown emoji. She watched the parade snake pass her house like someone witnessing a cult ritual. I could see her jaw tighten as we rolled a float past with dancers in cultural outfits from all over the world. But the cherry on top, the float following that. A pickup truck with a full-scale replica of the mural on its side panels. Painted bright, loud, alive, and at the top of the truck bed, a giant hand-painted Black Lives Matter flag, waving gently in the wind. It was glorious. I didn't stop to stare at her. I didn't even slow down, because this parade wasn't for her. It was for the little kids who now saw murals where they used to see fences. It was for the elderly couple who'd been invisible for too long. It was for Malik, for me, for all of us. Later that night, after the parade died down, we gathered at the center. There was music, food, laughter echoing into the night. I was wiping down a table when Elena came rushing in. "Have you seen the news?" I frowned. "Please don't say it's another lawsuit." She laughed and handed me her phone. It was a headline: HOA president cited for tax evasion linked to misuse of community funds. I blinked. What? Apparently, in trying to destroy me, Judith had drawn enough attention to herself that some digging had been done. And oh, what the internet can uncover. Turns out, she'd used HOA funds to pay for a landscaping crew that only worked on her property, and had listed several consultation expenses tied to a company her niece owned. Yeah, that kind of thing. Within 48 hours, she was hit with formal charges. When a local reporter asked her for comment, Judith muttered, "This is political persecution." Then she drove off in a Lexus with a back to blue sticker half peeled off. The irony? I didn't feel triumphant. Not really. I just felt done. Done with the fighting. Done with shrinking. Done letting someone like her define what belonging looks like. We closed that night with a candlelit walk down the block. No protests. No chants. Just neighbors walking. Together. Someone brought a portable speaker. Someone else brought a tray of cookies. Someone started singing softly, and a few joined in. As we passed Judith's house, a little girl ran ahead and left a single sunflower on her lawn. We didn't stop her. We didn't say anything. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's stillness. Back at the mural, we added a new phrase that night, right at the center, in large, flowing letters. We belong here. This wasn't just about a flag. It never was. I think deep down, I knew that the moment I stepped onto my porch that first day and found that HOA citation with Judith's signature at the bottom, accusing me of violating neighborhood harmony. It was never about harmony. It was about control. About who got to be seen, heard, accepted, safe. But looking around now, at the mural that stretched across the wall like a badge of honor, at the laughter echoing from the youth center's basketball court, at the Black, Asian, Latino, and white families who now call this block home, I knew something had shifted. Not just in the bylaws, in the heartbeat of the neighborhood. After the parade and Judith's legal takedown, things changed quickly. The HOA board underwent a full restructuring. The new president was Maria Alvarez, a single mom and former teacher with more empathy in her pinky than Judith had in her entire country club wardrobe. One of her first acts? Rewriting the HOA charter to explicitly allow expression of cultural identity, including flags, murals, and garden art. She called it the Unity Clause. The vote passed 38-2. Judith, of course, was one of the no votes. But by then, no one cared what Judith thought anymore. The community center, which I had once thought would be a temporary stopgap, exploded in popularity. We got grant funding from a local arts foundation. A tech company donated laptops for after-school programs. A retired chef offered to run cooking classes on Saturdays. Elena even organized a story time with grandparents, where elderly residents read to neighborhood kids. We were no longer just healing wounds. We were building foundations. One brick, one paint stroke, one laugh at a time. And then something unexpected happened. CNN wanted to do a follow-up. Not a Karen Gone Wild expose, a feature, a real, human look at how a moment of discrimination led to grassroots transformation. They brought cameras, yes, but they also brought curiosity, respect. I walked them through the mural. Showed them the youth room with its messy beanbags and tattered poetry books. Let them speak to Malik, who now wore his volunteer lanyard with more pride than any scout badge. They even interviewed Maria, who spoke with tears in her eyes about how she once feared putting up a Mexican flag on Cinco de Mayo because she didn't want trouble. Then she pointed to the new garden area we'd built in the center's backyard, where flags from 11 different countries now fluttered in the wind. "No one's invisible here anymore," she said. And I wept, right on camera. No shame. The story aired that Friday night, and it changed everything again. More emails, more donations, more murals popping up in towns across the country, each one tagged with #WeBelongHere. I started getting letters from people I'd never met. One woman wrote, "My daughter saw your story and asked if we could paint her wheelchair with flowers. Thank you for showing her beauty belongs anywhere." Another said, "I used to think I had to be quiet to be accepted. You reminded me that bold can be beautiful, too." And then came the one letter that floored me. It was from Judith's husband, not ex-husband, still married. Go figure. It read, "You probably don't want to hear from me. I get it. I just wanted to say thank you. After everything, I started seeing things I hadn't before. You made our street brighter. You gave my granddaughter a place she wants to walk to. And I'll admit, I was wrong not to speak up sooner. Judith and I aren't exactly on the same page anymore. Maybe we never were. But I wanted to send this photo. It's of me, wearing the wig you donated to the chemo center. I never thought I'd say this, but it made me feel seen. Thank you." He attached the photo. And there he was, bald, in the wig I'd anonymously sent to the cancer clinic after Judith mocked mine, smiling, not just politely, but with softness in his eyes. That photo, I printed it, framed it, hung it in the community center's entryway, because that was the moment I realized this wasn't just about fighting back. It was about planting seeds, even in enemy soil. Today, the mural is 3 times its original size. We've added names, stories, colors I couldn't even imagine when I first picked up that brush. Kids leave chalk messages in front of it. "I feel safe here. This wall listens. Thanks for letting me be me." People travel from out of town just to see it, to sit beneath it, to cry or laugh or take selfies. Whatever healing looks like for them. And every time I walk past it, I whisper something under my breath. You tried to erase us, so we made ourselves permanent. The HOA still exists, but it no longer controls us, because control is temporary. But belonging is forever. And as long as one child can look at our wall and say, "That looks like me," then every fight, every citation, every stare, every sleepless night was worth it.